the Galactic Empire, a coalition spanning countless star systems, had grown accustomed to its dominance over the galaxy. With advanced technology, powerful fleets, and an assortment of species under its control, the Empire had little tolerance for new, emerging powers. Among these new powers was humanity, whose rapid rise had not gone unnoticed. The Empire, with its centuries of history, had little regard for a species that had only recently reached the stars. Yet, when human colonies began spreading to the edges of the Empire's territory, tensions escalated. Diplomatic overtures from the humans were met with suspicion, and the Empire's leaders quickly concluded that humanity was a threat. Territorial disputes, allegations of resource theft, and perceived acts of defiance pushed the Empire toward war. To lead this campaign, the Empire appointed General Zirith, a battle-hardened veteran of countless wars and rebellions. His reputation for crushing enemies and bringing swift, brutal victories preceded him. Zirith had always believed in the overwhelming superiority of the Empire's military might. But this time was different. While he had seen countless alien species bend to the Empire's will, humans were a wild card, unpredictable and mysterious. Even before committing the full might of the Empire's forces, Zirith felt the need to understand his enemy more thoroughly. The War Council was in session, and tensions were high. The other generals, confident in their technological superiority, argued for immediate action. The humans were nothing more than a nuisance, they claimed, an inconvenience that could be crushed easily. But Zirith remained cautious. He had seen wars go awry when commanders underestimated their enemies, especially when the enemy was unlike any they had faced before. "We will not strike without knowing what we are up against," Zirith declared firmly. The council room fell into silence. The other generals exchanged glances, not accustomed to such hesitation. A few muttered in disagreement, but they knew better than to question Zirith openly. His reputation alone silenced most of them. He needed more than just intelligence reports from Empire spies. He needed to hear from someone who had lived among humans. Someone who had experienced their world firsthand. Zirith's mind was already turning as he requested a briefing from Vorik, an ambassador who had spent years on Earth. Vorik was an outsider in the Empire, his experiences dismissed as trivial by most, but Zirith knew that someone who had walked among humans might offer invaluable insights. "Let him speak," Zirith ordered. Vorik was summoned. He had been a member of the Empire's diplomatic corps, stationed on Earth many years ago. He had seen humanity up close, observed their behaviors, their culture, and their survival instincts. When he arrived at the council chamber, he appeared less like a typical dignitary and more like a weary veteran. His eyes held the weight of the stories he was about to tell, and his mandibles clicked nervously as he approached the podium. "My time on Earth was unforgettable," Vorik began, his voice gravelly, a hint of something darker behind his words. "It's a planet like no other. We call it a death world. It's not an exaggeration. Earth is hostile to life in ways you cannot imagine." He paused, gathering his thoughts before continuing. "The climate alone is enough to drive most species to extinction. The storms, the volcanoes, the earthquakes, every day, the planet seems on the verge of destroying everything. And yet, humans endure." The council listened intently, the room tense with curiosity. Vorik spoke of the extreme conditions on Earth, how natural disasters were a constant threat, how the weather could change from calm to catastrophic in moments, how diseases could wipe out entire populations in the blink of an eye. "Humans don't just survive in these conditions, they thrive. They rebuild after every disaster, even when their world seems to crumble. They don't run from danger, they face it head on." Vorik's words carried weight, as if each sentence bore the weight of 1,000 lessons learned the hard way. He described the human ability to adapt to any situation, to turn even the most hostile environments into something they could conquer. "Their resilience is unmatched," Vorik continued, his tone heavy. "What seems impossible to others, surviving in a land constantly ravaged by storms, floods, and wildfires, they embrace it. They have no choice. They are survivors above all." The generals sat in silence, exchanging looks, the gravity of Vorik's words beginning to sink in. They had thought of humanity as a mere nuisance, a small, insignificant species on the edge of their territory. But now, they began to see something else, a species that would not be easily defeated. Vorik then recounted how humans had once been prey on their own planet, vulnerable to larger, stronger predators. Over time, they had learned to defend themselves, not through raw power, but through strategy and ingenuity. Their survival wasn't a matter of strength, Vorik said. It was a matter of intelligence. They learned to wield fire, to hunt in packs, to use tools. They began to understand their environment in ways that most species could not fathom. The council members listened in rapt attention as Vorik detailed how humans had domesticated predators, wolves, specifically, and turned them into companions and tools for survival. They created alliances with creatures far stronger than themselves, he explained. It was a mark of their adaptability. They didn't need to be stronger, they needed to be smarter. Ziritha's mind raced as he processed this new information. He had assumed humans were merely a primitive species, one that relied on numbers and crude weapons. But now, he realized, they were something else entirely. Something much more dangerous. If humans had survived on a planet that was actively trying to destroy them, then what else could they accomplish? Vorik's words became even more vivid as he spoke of humanity's capacity for innovation. He recalled the development of simple tools that eventually gave way to sophisticated weapons, technologies, and strategies. Humans turned their world into a battlefield, and they mastered it, Vorik said. Their ingenuity is a weapon in itself. The council was silent, absorbing the weight of the ambassador's words. It was becoming clear that humanity was not to be underestimated. You see, Vorik continued, they are not warriors by nature, but they can be if pushed. They fight not for conquest, but for survival. They don't stop. They keep coming, no matter how many times they're knocked down. Zirith was now fully engaged, his earlier skepticism replaced by concern. He had expected a quick victory, a straightforward campaign. But what Vorik was describing was something far more formidable. If we push them, Zirith thought, they won't just fight, they'll fight until there's nothing left to fight for. Vorik's final words were haunting. If you force them to war, you will unleash a force unlike anything the galaxy has seen. They won't stop until they've broken you or themselves. That is the true danger of humanity. Their will to survive is their greatest strength. The room was deathly quiet after Vorik finished. General Zirith stood, his mind awash with the implications of what he had just heard. This wasn't just a battle between species, it was a battle of wills. The Empire could win, but the cost might be higher than any of them had anticipated. As Zirith turned to face the council, his voice was steady but filled with an undeniable gravitas. We will not go to war with humanity, he declared. Not yet. There is more to them than we realized. And if we push them too hard, it may be a storm we cannot control. Zirith stood silently, the weight of Vorik's words pressing down on him. The council chamber, filled with military leaders and strategists, seemed unnaturally still. The air was thick with the implications of what they had just heard. General Zirith had always trusted in the Empire's overwhelming strength, but what Vorik had revealed had shaken him. If humans could survive a world like Earth, unforgiving, unpredictable, and violent, then they were no mere prey. They were something far more dangerous. Zirith had heard stories about the fragility of humanity, how their bodies were weaker than many species in the Empire, how they lacked natural physical defenses. But these stories painted a picture of a species that was more than the sum of its parts. Humans had risen to dominance not through strength, but through strategy, adaptability, and relentless determination. Vorik's accounts of their survival instincts were terrifying. Humans were not just survivors, they were conquerors of their own planet, masters of a world that seemed intent on destroying them. The first revelation had struck Zirith deeply. Humans had not always been at the top of the food chain. They had started as prey, hunted by creatures far more powerful than themselves. Earth, as Vorik had described it, was a death world, dangerous and hostile, full of threats that made survival a constant struggle. The predators, the diseases, the brutal climate, All were challenges that no species could easily endure. And yet humans had. Not only had they survived, but they had thrived. Vorik had explained how humans had mastered the art of survival. They had learned to hunt, to use tools, and to adapt to their environment in ways other species could not even comprehend. Zirith could see it now. Humanity had learned to be clever, to use their intelligence to overcome what their bodies could not. It wasn't physical strength that made them dangerous. It was their ability to outthink and outlast their enemies. A human could face a predator far stronger than them, but if they were clever enough, they could trap it, outmaneuver it, or even tame it. They didn't just survive, they used everything around them to ensure they would. Vorik's stories about human ingenuity were especially chilling. Humans had weaponized fire, a simple but effective tool, to create the foundation of their technological revolution. Fire, which once kept them warm and cooked their food, became a weapon. From there, they built weapons, first simple, then complex. Tools turned into guns, which became missiles, which became bombs capable of destroying entire cities. In every instance, humans had taken what the world threw at them and made it their own. There was no challenge they would not face head-on, no problem they would not solve, no matter how impossible it seemed. The more Zirith thought about it, the clearer it became. The way humans had turned the most dangerous animals on their planet into allies was a perfect example of their resourcefulness. They didn't just fight nature, they made it work for them. They tamed wolves, powerful predators, and made them companions. That was the true nature of humanity, to take what was dangerous and make it useful. They could turn an adversary into an asset, and this ability to adapt and use everything to their advantage was what made them so unpredictable. Zirith now understood why the Empire had feared them. They had underestimated humans because they had judged them solely on their physical appearance. Humans were fragile, yes, but they had never relied on strength alone. The most dangerous thing about humanity was their ability to adapt, to innovate, and to learn. When cornered, they didn't crumble, they learned how to fight back, how to overcome the odds. This was not a species that could be destroyed through brute force alone. They would always find a way to survive. Vorik's next stories were equally disturbing. He spoke of humanity's involvement in wars, conflicts that had cost billions of lives. And yet, even after the devastation, humans had always rebuilt. They didn't just recover, they advanced. Zirith had assumed that humans would be easily overwhelmed by the Empire's superior technology and military might. But now, he realized, it wasn't technology that made humans so formidable. It was their willingness to sacrifice, to keep fighting even when the odds were impossible. In every conflict, humans had shown an uncanny ability to adapt and change their tactics, using ingenuity and willpower to overcome their enemies. Human history, as Vorik described it, was one of constant struggle. They fought wars, sometimes against each other, sometimes against external threats, but they never stopped. The horrors of World War I and II, the battles against invading forces, the wars of rebellion and revolution, humanity had endured all of them. And when it seemed like they had lost everything, they found a way to rebuild. They didn't just survive, they became stronger with each conflict, learning from their mistakes and developing better strategies. For every defeat, they found a way to turn it into a victory. This, Zirith realized, was humanity's true strength. It wasn't in their weapons, their technology, or even their ability to fight. It was in their unyielding will. Humans fought not just for victory, but for survival. When one door closed, they found another. When one strategy failed, they adapted and created a new one. No matter how many times they were knocked down, they always stood back up. And that made them a force to be reckoned with. Zirith's mind began to race as he considered the potential cost of a war with humanity. It was no longer a question of whether the Empire could defeat them. It was a question of how much the Empire was willing to sacrifice. A direct confrontation would not be an easy victory. Humans would not fall to conventional tactics or superior firepower. They would adapt, they would learn, and they would fight until there was nothing left to fight for. If the Empire chose war, it would be a battle of wills, and that was a fight no one could predict. As Vorik continued his tale, Zirith listened intently. The ambassador's description of human ingenuity, how they could take mundane materials and turn them into deadly weapons, only further cemented his understanding. Humans did not need the Empire's advanced technology to be dangerous. They could take what they had, no matter how basic, and turn it into something lethal. This was not a species that needed to be taken lightly. Zirith's thoughts were interrupted by Vorik's final tale. The ambassador spoke of a human child he had met during his time on Earth. The child, despite facing unimaginable hardship during a natural disaster, had smiled and offered Vorik food. "We'll rebuild. We always do," the child had said. That moment had haunted Vorik, and it haunted Zirith now. It was the essence of humanity in a single sentence: no matter what the universe threw at them, humans would always rebuild. They would always survive. They would always find a way. As Vorik finished his tale, the council chamber remained still. Zirith's mind was racing. The War Council had wanted to attack humanity with all the might the Empire had. But now, after hearing Vorik's account, he knew the truth: humanity was not to be underestimated. If the Empire went to war with them, they would be fighting an enemy unlike any they had ever faced. A species that did not fear death, but mastered it. Zirith's mind was reeling as Vorik finished speaking. The ambassador's recount of humanity's history and their ability to survive had shattered any illusions the general had about an easy conquest. A species that survived and thrived in the most hostile conditions imaginable, turning every challenge into an opportunity for growth, could not be dealt with in the simple, brutal manner the Empire had initially planned. Humanity was not just resilient, they were strategic, adaptable, and willing to sacrifice everything to achieve their goals. Zirith had always relied on the superiority of the Empire's military power, but this was different. This was not a war that could be won by strength alone. Vorik's description of humanity's ingenuity haunted him. The ambassador had spoken of their early days, when humans were little more than prey in a dangerous world, but they had used their intelligence to survive. They were not the strongest, nor the fastest, but they compensated with their cunning. They learned to use tools, weapons, fire. They weaponized nature itself. And once they had mastered their environment, they began to conquer not just the predators on their planet, but the planet itself. Zirith could not shake the image of humans turning their greatest threats into assets. Vorik had recounted how early humans had domesticated wolves, predators capable of killing them, but instead of running from them, they had tamed them, making them companions. Zirith understood now that this was a symbol of humanity's overall approach. Humans were not merely warriors, they were problem solvers, able to take any situation and make it work in their favor. They didn't simply fight against nature, they learned how to control it, how to bend it to their will. They didn't just conquer their world, they mastered it. That realization was unsettling. The Empire had assumed that humans were simply another species to be subdued, but now it seemed clear that humanity was something different. Their physical frailty was irrelevant. It was their mental fortitude, their relentless pursuit of progress, that made them dangerous. And the more Zirith thought about it, the more he realized just how deadly humans could be when pushed to their limits. Vorik had been right to warn them. Humans had a remarkable ability to adapt. Their history was a testament to that. Every time they had faced disaster, whether from natural forces or from their own kind, they had come back stronger. Zirith thought back to the great wars Vorik had described. World War I, World War II, wars that had nearly destroyed humanity. But instead of annihilation, they had rebuilt, advanced, and expanded. They did not stop at victory. They learned, they evolved, and they fought again. This was a species that would not be deterred by defeat. If anything, defeat only seemed to fuel their drive. Zirith was no stranger to war, but the more he heard, the more he realized that humanity's wars were not just battles for power. They were battles for survival. Humans fought because they had no choice but to. When one war ended, another would begin, but they did not fight with blind aggression. They fought with purpose, with ingenuity, with a fierce determination to overcome whatever stood in their way. They had fought wars against each other, yes, but they had also fought wars against nature, against famine, against disease. And every time, they had adapted and overcome. The Empire had grown accustomed to quick, decisive victories. A powerful fleet, superior weapons, and overwhelming force were usually enough to crush any resistance. But this was a different kind of enemy. Zirith could not help but imagine what it would be like to face an enemy who did not fear death, who did not simply accept defeat, but used every failure as a stepping stone to greater strength. Humanity could lose battles, but they could never lose the war, because they would never stop fighting. The stories Vorik had shared about human innovation sent a chill down Zirith's spine. The ambassador had spoken of how humans had transformed basic elements of their world into deadly weapons. Fire, once a tool for warmth and cooking, had become a weapon of destruction. Then came weapons of mass destruction, bombs, missiles, and technologies that could obliterate entire cities. They didn't need the advanced technology of the Empire to cause devastation. They had already proven that they could create destruction on their own. And once they had tasted that power, there was no telling how far they would go. But it wasn't just the weapons that made humans dangerous. It was their ability to innovate in every aspect of their lives. Zirith could no longer dismiss humans as a primitive species. They had shown time and time again that they could outthink, outlast, and outfight their enemies. They were not just fighting with weapons, they were fighting with ideas, with strategies that could turn any situation to their advantage. The more Zirith thought about it, the more he realized that if war came to pass, it would not be a matter of who had the strongest weapons, it would be a matter of who could outthink the other. And that was a fight the Empire might not win. The thought of facing a species that was not only willing to sacrifice everything to survive but also capable of unimaginable innovation was unsettling. Zirith had expected a campaign that would be brutal but straightforward. But now, it was clear that humanity was not a species that could be crushed through sheer force. They would find a way to turn the battle around. They would adapt. They would fight until there was nothing left. If the Empire engaged them in war, it would not be over quickly. It would be a war of attrition, a war that would drain both sides, a war in which victory would be hard-won and never guaranteed. Vorik's final words about humanity's spirit rang in Zirith's mind. The ambassador had told the story of a child, a survivor of a natural disaster, who had smiled and offered Vorik food despite losing everything. "We'll rebuild. We always do." Those words captured the essence of humanity's strength. They could endure unimaginable loss and still find the will to fight on. This was not a species that could be broken. They could be pushed to the brink, but they would always return, always rebuild, always find a way to survive. Zirith understood now that this was not just a war for territory or resources. This was a war for survival, and if the Empire was going to engage humanity, they would have to be prepared for a battle unlike anything they had ever faced. A battle that could last centuries, that could change the course of the galaxy, and that would demand more than just weapons, it would demand the very will to fight. And if the Empire underestimated humanity, they might find themselves on the losing side. As the meeting came to a close, Zirith felt a weight on his shoulders. The decision he would have to make was not one he could take lightly. The war that had seemed inevitable now felt uncertain, fraught with danger and unknowns. If the Empire pushed humanity too far, they would not just face an enemy, they would face a force of nature, a species that would never stop fighting. Zirith knew one thing for certain: humanity was not a species that could be crushed by brute force. If they went to war, it would be a war of wills, and that was a battle the Empire might not win. The weight of Vorik's stories hung heavy in the air as the council room remained unnervingly silent. General Zirith stood at the front, his thoughts racing. The other generals exchanged uneasy glances, some of them whispering quietly, but none daring to speak up. Zirith's mind churned with the implications of what he had just learned about humanity. Everything he had believed about them, every assumption, had been shattered in those moments. What seemed like an easy conquest now felt like a dangerous gamble. The ambassador's stories, laden with human resilience, ingenuity, and unwillingness to submit, were a sobering reminder of what lay ahead if the Empire chose war. Humanity was not like any adversary the Empire had ever faced. They were not conquerors by nature, but if pushed, they would become something even more dangerous. They would become a force of nature, relentless, adaptable, and nearly impossible to stop. The Empire had relied on its sheer strength to crush its enemies for centuries, but humanity was not so easily intimidated. They didn't cower in fear. They rose to challenges, even when they had no reason to expect victory. The very nature of their existence proved they were not to be underestimated. Xerath's gaze swept across the room. He could see the War Council's leadership quietly reconsidering their initial eagerness for war. It was clear that Vorik's accounts had struck a chord. The thought of engaging in a drawn-out war with a species that would not back down, that would continue to fight, adapt, and outsmart every move made against them, was no longer something the Empire was willing to entertain. The idea of a quick victory was slipping further and further out of reach. Xerath understood now that humanity's greatest weapon wasn't their physical strength, it was their indomitable will to survive, to fight, and to adapt. Xerath turned slowly to the Emperor, who had been silent throughout the meeting, his sharp eyes observing the proceedings closely. The room held its breath as the Emperor considered the gravity of the situation. There was no rush now, no hasty commands for immediate action. The Emperor, ever the tactician, had seen the wisdom in Xerath's caution. He had heard the words of Vorik, and something had shifted in his own calculations. The Empire could not simply crush humanity the way they had done to countless species before them. There was something deeply unique about humans, something that warranted respect, not disdain. The Emperor's voice finally broke the silence, low and contemplative. "We have underestimated them," he began, his words deliberate, each syllable weighing heavily in the room. "Humanity's survival is not an accident. It is the result of a force we have not fully understood. They are not a species driven solely by conquest, but by survival. And that, as Vorik has made clear, is a force that can neither be broken nor dismissed lightly." The room was still, and Xerath could feel the tension in the air. He had anticipated this moment. It was clear now that the Empire was on the verge of shifting its approach. The thought of engaging humanity in battle now seemed less appealing. If the Empire waged war, it would not be just another conquest. It would be a war of attrition, one that would drain the Empire's resources and its morale. Humanity could endure the worst of things, while the Empire's patience was far less certain. Xerath knew that a direct conflict with them would be costly, unpredictable, and potentially disastrous. If they were pushed, humans would fight back with a level of resilience that the Empire was not prepared to match. "General Xerath," the Emperor continued, his gaze fixed on the leader, "you have seen what they are capable of. What do you recommend?" Xerath paused, carefully considering his response. His earlier instincts had been to strike hard and fast, but now he understood the complexity of what they faced. Humanity wasn't a typical enemy. It was not a species that could be toppled with conventional force. In truth, Xerath felt uneasy at the thought of launching an all-out war with humanity. Their adaptability, their ability to learn and grow in the face of adversity, made them unlike any species the Empire had ever faced. "We must reconsider our course," Xerath said at last, his voice steady, though filled with a newfound respect for humanity. "They are not a species that will fall easily. The cost of war with them would be catastrophic, and we risk losing far more than we gain. The Empire's strength may not be enough to subdue them." The Emperor listened carefully, and after a long silence, he finally nodded. "Then we will not go to war." His voice was firm, a decision made with careful thought. "Instead, we will offer them an alliance." The words hung in the air like a sudden storm. An alliance with humanity? It was a notion that had never been on the table, but the more Xerath thought about it, the more it made sense. Humanity's survival, their intelligence, their resilience, these were qualities that could benefit the Empire, not destroy it. The Empire's resources were vast, but humanity's potential was untapped. It was clear now that they could no longer be viewed as a nuisance or a threat. They could be an asset, a powerful ally in the uncertain future of the galaxy. Ziritha's mind raced as he processed the Emperor's words. An alliance with humanity would be far more beneficial than a war. The Empire could learn from them, grow alongside them. It would not be a partnership of domination, but one of mutual respect and cooperation. The Empire could share its vast knowledge and resources, while humanity could contribute its ingenuity, its unique approach to problem-solving, and its relentless determination to overcome adversity. Together, they could accomplish things neither could alone. Vorik had been right. Humanity's greatest strength was not its weapons, nor its size or strength, but its capacity for resilience, adaptation, and innovation. They were survivors, and that was something the Empire could learn to respect. "We will extend the offer of an alliance," the Emperor declared. "But we must tread carefully. Humanity has no reason to trust us, not yet. We must be patient, strategic. We cannot simply force them into submission." The room was silent for a moment, each member of the council considering the ramifications of this new direction. The war was off, but the challenge of forging an alliance with humanity would not be simple. It would require diplomacy, understanding, and above all, respect. The Empire's previous assumptions about humanity had been shattered, and now they were faced with a new challenge: to build something lasting with a species that was capable of far more than anyone had ever expected. The decision was made. The war that had seemed inevitable was now a distant possibility, and a new path lay ahead, one of cooperation and alliance. Zirith, for the first time in what felt like years, felt a sense of hope. Perhaps humanity was not the threat the Empire had feared, but a potential partner. The galaxy was vast, and if the Empire could make peace with humanity, there was no telling what they could accomplish together. As the council session came to an end, Zirith left the room with a sense of quiet anticipation. The path ahead would not be easy. There were challenges to face, and trust to be built. But humanity, for all its flaws, had shown that it could rise to any occasion. Perhaps the Empire, too, could learn to rise alongside them. The galaxy, after all, was full of possibilities, if only they were willing to seize them.